You know, there are some events in history that they change everything. They draw a line in the sand. April 20th, 1999 was one of those days. The tragedy at Columbine High School wasn't just a news story. It was a profound turning point for America. And to really understand it, we have to start with one single haunting number. 13. That's the number that will forever be burned into our memory from that day. 13 innocent people, 12 students and one teacher, were murdered by two of their own classmates. It was a meticulously planned attack that, all told, lasted less than an hour. So, to really get why this event had such a lasting impact, we've got to dig into what actually went down at Columbine High School. Because this wasn't just a spontaneous act of violence. Far from it. This was meant to be a massive terrorist bombing, a bombing that failed and then morphed into something else, something horrifyingly different. Think about this. The entire attack, from the very first shot fired to the moment the killers took their own lives, was over in just 49 minutes. But in that small window of time, a lifetime of pain was inflicted. To truly grasp what happened, we need to walk through how those 49 minutes unfolded, moment by terrifying moment. And this right here, this is a piece of the story that so many people get wrong or just don't know. The shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, didn't just plan a shooting. Their main goal was to kill hundreds of their classmates with massive bombs they'd planted in the cafeteria. The shooting rampage that followed, that was actually their improvised Plan B when those bombs failed to go off. Just look at this timeline. You can see how fast everything just spiraled out of control. At 11:10 a.m., they plant the bombs. Just 9 minutes later, when it's clear the bombs aren't working, the shooting starts outside. A mere 10 minutes after that, they make their way into the library, which would become the site of the most intense violence. And then by 12:08, it's all over. And in the middle of all this absolute chaos, you have these two extremes. Just unimaginable horror, but also incredible heroism. The library basically became an execution chamber. But then you also have the story of teacher Dave Sanders, who, even after being shot, ran through the hallways yelling for students to get out, saving countless lives at the cost of his own. Okay, so after the attack, in all the confusion and the 24/7 news cycle, a story started to take shape. And a lot of that story, well, it was filled with inaccuracies that have somehow stuck around for decades. It's so important that we separate the painful facts from the fiction that has grown around this tragedy. So many of these myths became the story of Columbine. You probably heard them. The Trenchcoat Mafia? Nope, the shooters weren't actually members. The whole idea that this was about outcasts getting revenge on the jocks who bullied them? Well, the investigation found the victims were chosen at random, not based on social status. The reality was a lot more complex and, honestly, a lot more disturbing than these simple stories. So if it wasn't really about cliques or revenge on bullies, then what was it about, right? That's the big question. Why? Why did this happen? While we may never have a perfect answer, the psychological profiles and the killer's own writings give us some really disturbing clues. What the FBI ultimately concluded is that this was basically a partnership between two very different but equally dangerous personalities. You had Eric Harris, who they profiled as a clinical psychopath, cold, calculating, with a god complex. And then you had Dylan Klebold, who was seen as severely depressed and suicidal, just filled with rage and self-hatred. It was a lethal combination, a psychopath leading a depressive.
And this quote, this is from Eric Harris's journal, written right before the attack. It gives you a really chilling look inside his head. It wasn't just about being bullied. It was this profound sense of superiority, this deep rage at a world he felt had somehow wronged him.
And make no mistake, this was not some spur-of-the-moment thing. They didn't just snap. Their own journals and the infamous basement tapes they recorded proved this attack was meticulously planned for over a year. They figured out how to get weapons, they built bombs, they rehearsed. Their goal wasn't just murder, it was to become infamous. So the shooting itself was over by 12:08 p.m. on that Tuesday. But the impact of Columbine, that was just getting started. The ripples from that one event fundamentally changed America in ways we are still dealing with today. And maybe the darkest part of this whole legacy is something that experts now call the Columbine effect. Because of the nonstop media coverage and the release of the killer's own writings, they almost became these dark anti-heroes. They left a blueprint, a grim script that has tragically inspired dozens of documented copycat plots and attacks ever since. One of the biggest lessons from Columbine came from how law enforcement responded. At the time, the rulebook said to surround the building, set up a perimeter, and wait for the SWAT team to arrive. Well, that took way too long, allowing the killing to continue inside for nearly an hour. The lesson was brutal but clear. That protocol failed. Now, the training is completely different. First responders are taught to go in immediately and confront the shooter, a direct result of the failures of that day. And the changes to society were huge. Think about it. Things that are now totally normal for kids in school, they started right after Columbine. Active shooter drills became a routine part of the school year. Zero-tolerance policies were put in place everywhere. The national conversation around gun control, around mental health, it was all permanently altered. But here's the thing. For all those changes, the problem didn't stop. Not even close. Since 1999, more than 415 people have died in school shootings here in the United States. That number is just a stark, tragic reminder of Columbine's ongoing legacy. And all of this, it brings us to one last, really tough question. The tragedy at Columbine forced America to look at some of its darkest issues, from gun violence to mental health to what's happening with our kids. All these years later, the debates rage on. And you really have to wonder, have we truly learned the lessons from that terrible day in Colorado?